The first thing Commander Telrex noticed before the humans arrived was laughter. Not polite diplomatic laughter. Not nervous chatter from frightened soldiers. Real laughter, deep, reckless, almost joyful. Which made no sense at all. Because the situation was hopeless. Telrex stood on the shattered balcony of Outpost Theta 9, staring across the crimson desert of Carthos 4. The horizon burned with artillery flashes. Smoke towers twisted into the sky like black serpents. The Dravari Armada had arrived 2 days earlier. 30 warships, thousands of ground troops, biotanks that could crush armored carriers like soda cans, and Telrex had 400 defenders. His species, the Velari, had never been warriors. They were traders, engineers, diplomats, soft-skinned creatures who believed treaties solved problems. Today proved otherwise. A plasma bolt slammed into the outer wall, shaking the fortress. Telrex flinched. Beside him, Lieutenant Serial checked the tactical display. "We've lost Sector 3, she said, voice trembling. Telrex closed his eyes. Sector 3 meant the eastern shield grid, which meant the next wave would break straight through. He exhaled slowly. Contact the Galactic Coalition again. Serial hesitated. "Commander, we already did. They said." "I know what they said," he interrupted. "They said reinforcements are unavailable." A distant explosion thundered across the valley. Telrex stared at the sky. Every species in the coalition had refused help. Except one. The humans. 3 hours ago, in desperation, Telrex had sent a message across subspace frequencies. A simple plea: Outpost Theta 9 under siege. Requesting any available assistance. He hadn't expected an answer. 10 minutes later, a transmission arrived. The voice sounded amused. Request received. Sending reinforcements. That was all. No fleet. No numbers. No strategy. Just reinforcements. Telrex rubbed his temples. "Lieutenant, if the humans arrive, how many do you think they'll send?" Serial considered. "A squad, perhaps. Humans prefer small tactical units. 10 soldiers wouldn't change anything. Still better than nothing." Another explosion rocked the fortress. Sirens screamed. Serial's display flickered violently. "Commander, Dravari assault wave approaching the main gate." Telrex grabbed his rifle. "Then we greet them properly." The ground trembled as the first Dravari tanks crested the dunes. Monstrous machines, black, spiked, armored like prehistoric beasts. Behind them marched the Dravari infantry, 8-foot reptilian warriors with serrated rifles and glowing crimson armor. Thousands. 400 defenders versus an army. Telrex activated the fortress loudspeakers. "All units, prepare for final engagement." Static crackled. Then dozens of voices answered, not with fear, not with panic, but with tired acceptance. A soldier laughed. "Well, at least we'll make them work for it." Another added dryly, "Think the humans will show up before we die?" "Sure. Right after the politicians grow spines," muttered someone else. Telrex allowed himself a small smile. Then the sky screamed. At first, it sounded like thunder. Then the thunder became a roar. Then a hurricane. Every soldier looked up. Clouds above Carthos 4 split like torn fabric, and something enormous punched through orbit. A ship? No. Not a ship. A monster. It slammed into the desert 2 kilometers behind the fortress, flattening dunes and throwing a shockwave across the battlefield. Dravari tanks toppled like toys. Sandstorms erupted. Then the dust settled. And the thing opened. A gigantic armored carrier, bigger than most warships, unfolded like a mechanical beast. Ramps crashed into the sand. Doors hissed open. Humans poured out. Hundreds. No, thousands. Serial's voice cracked. "Commander, that is not a squad." Telrex stared at the endless line of armored figures marching into formation, each wearing combat armor scarred and defaced like battle trophies, each carrying weapons capable of ripping tanks apart. At the front walked a massive human with a cigar clenched between his teeth. He activated an external speaker. All right, you ugly lizard bastards. You asked for reinforcements, he paused, grinning, so we brought a battalion. Behind him, 3,000 human soldiers slammed magazines into their weapons. The sound echoed like thunder. Talrex whispered softly, "Oh." Serial blinked. "What?" Talrex smiled grimly. "I believe the Dravari have made a terrible mistake." The human commander spat his cigar into the sand, then roared into the comms. "Marines!" 3,000 voices answered. "Rav!" The commander pointed toward the Dravari army. "Let's show them what happens when you poke humanity." And the humans charged. The desert exploded into war. The Dravari blinked. Or rather, they tried to blink, but the humans didn't give them the chance. The battalion moved like a storm, a living tidal wave of flesh, steel, and firepower. Talrex watched from the balcony as humans scattered into 3 columns, each smaller than the army they faced but moving with precision no Velari soldier had ever seen. The front column charged head-on. Not with the caution the Dravari expected, but with reckless audacity. Explosions detonated beneath biotanks as humans launched magnetic mines directly into the treads. Plasma cannons roared, and in minutes, the seemingly indestructible machines were reduced to molten scrap. "Impossible," muttered a Dravari officer over the battlefield comms. "How are they?" A sharp whistle cut him off. Then came the second column. Human sharpshooters hidden in the dunes, sniper rifles practically invisible to thermal sensors, firing with lethal accuracy. Heads rolled, limbs shattered, morale cracked before the first wave of humans had even breached the walls. Talrex exhaled slowly, feeling a rush of disbelief and relief. "They fight differently." "Yes, Commander," Serial whispered. "Like predators." But it wasn't just brute force. Humans had a genius for chaos. They set up ambushes within seconds, turning the terrain into a death trap. Sand became smoke screens, overturned tanks became barricades, even the wreckage of their own weapons was used to mislead Dravari units into crossfire zones. Then came the most terrifying part. The humans didn't just kill, they toyed. Psychological warfare that Talrex had never imagined possible. One human ran in front of a charging Dravari column waving a bloodied rifle overhead, shouting in a language Talrex didn't understand, yet the sheer audacity caused a ripple of panic. Another climbed atop a smoking tank, flipping it like a toy, and waved at the enemy, smiling as though the battlefield were a playground. "Are they insane?" Serial asked. Talrex shook his head. "No, they're human. This is exactly how they want it." By mid-afternoon, the Dravari commanders were frantically trying to reorganize their troop. Every plan they had made fell apart in seconds. Mines detonated where they shouldn't have been, ambushes sprung from dunes, and communications jammed by devices no one knew existed. Then came the crushing blow. The human commander, the massive one with the cigar, appeared at the Dravari rear. No one knew how he got there. Tanks were destroyed around him. Infantry either fell back or surrendered. And yet he stood, alone, like a god among mortals. He raised his rifle. And fired. Not a single shot, but a wave of missiles from the humans' mobile artillery units erupted across the Dravari formation. Within minutes, entire regiments vanished. Dust, flame, and metal filled the air. The Dravari soldiers screamed, not just in fear, but in disbelief. Who are these monsters?" One Dravari officer stammered, watching his empire crumble before a handful of humans. "They are humanity," Talrex said softly, almost to himself. "And they are exactly what we needed." The battlefield became a symphony of destruction. Humans moved like shadows and storms combined. Tanks were disarmed with grappling hooks and explosive. Infantry were flanked from impossible angles. Communication lines collapsed. Dravari morale shattered so completely that some soldiers literally turned and fled toward the desert storms. Amid the chaos, Talrex noticed something that made him shiver. Humans weren't just killing, they were studying. Every pattern, every hesitation, every predictable instinct of the Dravari was catalogued. They adapted instantly. They learned as they fought, turning every mistake into a weapon. By the time the Dravari realized they were outmaneuvered, it was too late. And then came the psychological coup de grace. The humans began capturing key Dravari officers, not to execute immediately, but to parade them in front of their own troop. Screens projected the Velari and human alliances, mocking the Dravari leaders' confidence, showing how easily they were outsmarted and outgunned. Fear spread faster than weapons. Confusion multiplied the chaos. Talrex could hardly breathe, watching the carnage and precision all at once. He whispered, I don't know how they do this." Serial looked at him grimly. "They're humans. That's how." By nightfall, the battlefield was unrecognizable. Once a sprawling Dravari army, it now lay in twisted wreckage, with human units holding every strategic point. The human commander walked among the survivors, inspecting, laughing, sometimes shouting orders, sometimes telling a soldier to pick up a fallen tank's turret and move it like a toy. Talrex realized something terrifying. These humans weren't just soldiers. They were a force of nature. And nature did not negotiate. As the last Dravari forces retreated into the desert, leaving behind everything, vehicles, weapons, even wounded comrades, the human commander finally turned toward Talrex and Serial. He raised his rifle and spat the remains of his cigar into the sand. "Your outpost requested reinforcements," he said, voice calm now, deadly in its quiet power. "We delivered. Consider yourselves lucky. Next time, we don't negotiate." Talrex swallowed. "Next time?" The human grinned. "Yeah, next time. But for now, welcome to humanity." And somewhere in the desert, where the Dravari had once thought they held the advantage, they realized a horrifying truth. They had underestimated humans. Badly. The Dravari Empire hadn't just lost a battle, they had been humiliated. In the Galactic Council chambers, their ambassadors trembled, claws scraping the polished floors. Screens showed the footage. Thousands of humans storming the desert, tossing tanks like toys, flanking entire regiments before the Dravari could even react. The screams, the chaos, the sheer audacity of it all, it was a nightmare no strategist had ever predicted. And the humans weren't finished. Commander Talrex stood in the aftermath of Theta 9, surveying the ruins with Serial. The outpost, battered but standing, was now a symbol, not of survival alone, but of a new power in the galaxy. Serial shook her head. "I don't understand, how can a species fight like that? They don't even seem afraid of dying." Talrex nodded slowly. "They're not afraid because they've decided death is negotiable. Or at least, optional." The humans, meanwhile, were doing something the Dravari didn't anticipate. They were organizing. Salvaging what they could, treating the wounded, even enemy prisoners, with efficiency that bordered on mockery. Every act seemed calculated to send a message. Humanity does not just fight. Humanity survives, adapts, and humiliates. Then came the twist. Talrex received a secure transmission from the Coalition High Command. Dravari diplomats were requesting immediate peace talk. But the message was desperate, frantic. They demanded a meeting with humans. Alone. No intermediaries. Talrex raised an eyebrow. "They're begging." "Yes," Serial replied, voice trembling. "They know they were defeated, but why approach humans? Because the humans didn't just destroy armies. They broke confidence. They shattered assumptions. And now the Dravari feared what humanity might do next." The meeting was set on neutral ground, a barren moon orbiting a lifeless star. Humans arrived in small, nimble dropship. 300 soldiers, fully armed, formed a cordon around their delegation. At the center, the massive commander, the one with the cigar, sat casually, legs stretched, cigar glowing faintly, arms resting on the backs of chairs like a king surveying his conquered court. The Dravari delegation approached cautiously, claws twitching nervously. Their ambassador opened the discussion, voice trembling with practiced diplomacy. "We wish to discuss terms. You have our attention." The human commander leaned forward. "Terms? You want terms after you tried to wipe out an entire outpost and thought nobody would notice?" The Dravari ambassador faltered. "We miscalculated." "Miscalculated?" the human barked, slamming a fist on the table. "You invaded, you crushed your own troops under your arrogance, and you're lucky we didn't. Well, let's just say Theta 9 is still standing. For now." A tense silence filled the room. The Dravari tried to interject, but the humans ignored them, each movement deliberate. Talrex noticed the subtle power shift. Humans weren't just here to negotiate, they were rewriting the rules. Then came the psychological twist. The humans released footage from the battle, edited to highlight Dravari incompetence. Tanks collapsing, commanders fleeing, soldiers panicked and unorganized. The Dravari delegation's claws trembled as their empire's pride was displayed like a public execution. The human commander leaned back, smiling. "We didn't just win. We taught a lesson. Your army? Broken. Your strategy? Obsolete. Your leadership? Questionable at best." The Dravari ambassador tried one last gambit. "This is an exaggeration. You only faced a fraction." "Fraction?" The human snorted. "We fought your entire forward corps. And guess what? We still have reserve. Whole fleets. Thousands more soldiers. You want to test that?" Fear spread like wildfire. The Dravari realized too late that they weren't negotiating with a single battle-hardened unit. They were facing a species whose genius lay in scale, audacity, and adaptability. Humans had turned every advantage into a weapon and every miscalculation of the enemy into opportunity. By the end of the session, the Dravari agreed to terms. Not because they had to, but because they had no choice. Humiliation carved deep into their species' pride. And humanity? They walked away, leaving the council chambers shaken, whispering tales of audacity and sheer recklessness no one dared oppose. Talrex exhaled, a mixture of awe and disbelief washing over him. They didn't just fight. They humiliated the Empire. And they did it almost casually. Serial's antennae twitched. Casual? "Commander, they destroyed entire divisions in hours." Talrex nodded. "Exactly. And they did it on purpose. To remind everyone that humans are unpredictable, dangerous, terrifying." And somewhere in the shadows of the council, leaders whispered rumors that would change the galaxy forever, that humans weren't just soldiers, they were a storm no empire could fully control. The desert had cooled, but the echoes of war lingered. The sand was littered with the remnants of tanks, weapons, and armor, reminders that no empire, no matter how mighty, could predict humanity. Talrex walked among the survivors, his boots crunching over scorched earth. The humans were everywhere, not just patrolling, but organizing, repairing, and consolidating. Every action was precise, efficient, almost casual. Yet in their casualness was a danger the Dravari had never imagined, an intelligence that turned chaos into opportunity. The massive human commander approached, cigar smoldering in the wind. His armor bore scratches and scorched marks, trophies of battle, yet he carried himself like he had just stepped out for a morning stroll. "Commander Talrex," he said, voice low but commanding, "your little outpost held longer than anyone expected. That's impressive." Talrex bowed slightly. "We survived because of you. And because of them," he said, gesturing to the humans still moving among the ruins. The human commander smirked. "Survived? That's not how humans think. We don't just survive. We leave a message." A rumble rose in the distance. Talrex squinted and froze. The Dravari weren't gone, they were regrouping. From the horizon, armored reinforcements crested the dunes, faster and angrier than before. Talrex's heart sank. The humans didn't flinch. The commander lit another cigar. "Oh, they're coming back, huh? Good. We were getting bored." Within moments, the battlefield became a stage for humanity's audacity. The humans split into squads, some engaging head-on, others flanking, and yet others setting traps the Dravari hadn't even conceived. Every move was a lesson in tactical genius. Tanks were led into sand pits disguised by dust clouds. Infantry was funneled into ambush zones, where automated drones rained precise fire. The Dravari soldiers panicked, screams mixing with the roar of weaponry. Then came the final twist. The humans didn't just defeat the enemy, they humiliated them. Dravari officers were captured and marched across the battlefield under human banners, while loudspeakers broadcast messages mocking their arrogance, exposing every failure. This is what happens when you underestimate humans, the commander's voice boomed across the dunes. Next time, bring a bigger army, or don't bother. Taurex felt a chill. This wasn't just war. It was a demonstration of supremacy. A message carved into the minds of every alien species in orbit and on every colony. Humans were unpredictable, brutal, brilliant, and terrifyingly united. By sunset, the Dravari forces were scattered, their pride in ruins, their leadership humiliated. The battlefield quieted, save for the humans consolidating their victory. They didn't celebrate loudly. They moved efficiently, tending to the wounded, salvaging what they could, and preparing for the inevitable next threat. The commander finally approached Taurex. "Remember this day," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Not because we fought, but because you saw what humans can do. Never underestimate us again." Taurex nodded, awe and fear mixing in equal measure. "We won't. But how do you endure this? How do you fight like that and still remain human?" The commander shrugged, lighting his cigar once more. "We fight because we have to. We survive because we must. And we win because we never let anyone tell us otherwise. That's humanity." As the humans prepared to depart, Taurex realized the truth. The galaxy had changed. No alien empire would forget this day, and no politician could ignore it. Humanity had arrived not merely as warriors, but as a force that rewrote the rules of engagement, strategy, and fear. And somewhere deep in the desert, where the Dravari had once imagined they held power, a new legend was being written, one that would echo across stars for generations. The humans didn't just fight. They conquered expectation. They humiliated arrogance. They delivered vengeance with a smile. And they left the galaxy knowing one undeniable truth: underestimate humanity at your peril. The stars would remember.